It is the same process, but instead of large amounts of enzymes in a short period of time, very small amounts of the enzymes that are dripping into your tissues for decades at a time. And that's what culminates in the loss of cartilage progressively over time that eventually causes the symptoms of osteoarthritis. The progressive loss of osteoid in bone that leads to the leaching of calcium and magnesium salts out of the bone that leads to osteopenia and then osteoporosis. That is what leads to slow progressive loss of brain cells. This is at the core of many of the chronic degenerative diseases that have become so very common. And the reason why they have become so very common is because our food has changed in a way that allows, in fact, it forces chronic inflammatory stress on us, whether we like it or not. And this is a little graph that shows how our 6:3 ratios have increased over time. If we had all day, I'd explain to you what the reasons for this change are. I just want to show you that this change. It used to be about maybe 2, maybe 3 to 1. Now the European average is 15 to 1. North America is 25 to 1. And our polyphenol intakes have fallen by about 60 to 90%. The 6:3 ratio has increased. Okay, go on. You forced my hand, I'll tell you. The reason why the 6:3 ratio has increased is because the food industry uses huge amounts of plant oils. Corn oil, soy oil, the high 6:3 ratio. They put them in all the ultra-processed foods. That's one thing. We're also consuming less seafood. So that's the reason for that skewing. The reason for our fall in the intake of polyphenols, well, take something as simple as an apple. Does anyone here have an apple? You know that an apple a day, right? And no one here has one. Okay. Oh, you have an apple. Right over here. I don't care. I will do. Okay, where are the polyphenols in this apple? They're in the skin and they're around the core. Why? The polyphenols are there to protect the apple against microbes, against predators, against ultraviolet. And they're around the core to protect the genetic information that will ensure the next generation of apple trees. Okay, if you eat the whole apple, the skin and the core and everything, you're actually doing yourself a favor. Even the seeds, because the seeds contain cyanogenic glycosides that improve various aspects of immune function. If instead of buying an apple and eating an apple, you were to go to McDonald's and order a black apple pie, which bears no resemblance to an apple whatsoever, it's really just fiber and sugar. Well, what do they do at McDonald's Central? Well, they'll take the peel of the apple and take the core out, and all that's left is the flesh, and that's hardly got any polyphenols left in it at all. So, I mean, that's just one example of it. Thank you. That's exactly what I'm teaching you. So our intake of polyphenols has declined, and that, again, you can begin to see why we have so much chronic inflammatory stress now. But these are the companies that are killing you. I'm not saying it's a conspiracy. Quite. Maybe it's a collusion. Maybe that's probably a more accurate way of describing it. And none of these foods are acutely toxic. This is not like, swallowing strychnine or arsenic. It's not quite like that. I mean, you can just pick one of these at random. This is good enough for this. Some chocolate bars over there. You can, if you so wish, go home tonight and eat a bar of Cadbury's milk chocolate if you want, although it's terrible chocolate. And you'll still survive to see the morning. That's not how it works. But if you eat large amounts of these foods for long periods of time, yes, they will make you sick and they will kill you because they cause chronic inflammatory stress, which leads to all the problems I just mentioned. And they cause dysbiosis and they cause glycemic overload. I mean, you can't survive this kind of diet because the major anti-inflammatory nutrients have been taken away. This means your protection's gone. That means you have the wrong microbes in the gut. That means your innate immune system can't work. All these things have gone for different reasons. They've been replaced by these interesting compounds. And they are produced when you cook up large amounts of foods very quickly. In order to do that, because there are cogent reasons. If you have a food production plant, you want to move the stuff really quickly. You need to use processes and temperatures which are a bit different from those you use in the kitchen. Spray drying, for example. And you end up with quite large amounts of these compounds, and they're pro-inflammatory. So the anti-inflammatory compounds have gone, the pro-inflammatory compounds have come in. No wonder we have so much chronic inflammation. And then they fill these foods full of sugar, and the sugar is no not just in foods where you expect it to be, such as cakes and biscuits and ice cream. It's also in foods where you don't expect it, such as tomato ketchup, which in some brands is 30% sugar by weight. You don't taste that because it's covered with sugar and spices, but there's a heck of a lot of sugar in most brands of tomato ketchup, even if they say no added sugar. So, yeah, there are ways of getting around these label claims. And then to make matters worse, the other cheap ingredient they add to many ultra-processed foods is table salt. Table salt is, as I'm sure you all know, sodium chloride. So they fill us full of sodium, and for those of you who have been through, I don't know, I guess basic biology 101, you don't have to go to med school, you may remember that it's the ratio of these electrolytes, magnesium, potassium, and sodium, that determine how excitable your smooth muscle is. This is a diet that gives you lots of sodium, really not very much magnesium or potassium, so smooth muscle constricts. So if you have inflammation in your arteries, it means they will constrict more. Your blood pressure will go up. If you have inflammation in your airways, your bronchioles, the little tracts that allow the air to enter deep into the lungs, they start to constrict more as well. So your asthma will become worse. That's why in the Victorian era, people had asthma that was so mild that it could be treated with steam and eucalyptus. By now, we see children dying of asthma. This is a diet which will kill you. Absolutely will kill you. That is responsible for most of the phenomenology of the aging process that we see today. This is the diet that fills the hospitals and the clinics, that steals so much of your time on this earth, so much of your health, so much of your biological potential. And it also causes malnutrition. Again, widely acknowledged now amongst my peers and scientific betters. Now this is the type of malnutrition we were taught in medical school, which is type A. A catastrophic loss of one particular nutrient, typically a water-soluble micronutrient that we don't store well. So we know about scurvy, beriberi, and pellagra. We know about kwashiorkor, and you still come across this occasionally in parts of the less developed nations. But that's not what we see in London or Paris or Rome or New York. We see type B, because people are not eating very much, we're not as physically active as we used to be. A lot of the foods we eat contain empty calories, so we end up low in very many vitamins and minerals, but also in a wide range of phytonutrients that we know are important for our long-term health as well. Do any of you eat them? Oh, of course you do. None of you ever eat anything like this. How about this? Some of you give this to your children. Don't lie to me, I know you do. I mean, you might as well just give them a Mars bar. This is effectively confection. These foods are absolutely terrible. You never eat this. Or do you? Yes, you do. Don't lie to me, I know you do. These foods are delicious. I like it as much as you do. I try and restrain myself. I don't always succeed. But these are predominantly empty calories. Lots of sugar, not particularly good for you. Ice cream is an ultra-processed food. There's really no getting around that. And this is the most ultra-processed food of all. It is sugar. It is sugar, and that is all that it is. And this man has forgotten the basic principle: never get high on your own supply. He's obviously drunk a lot of Coca-Cola. He probably hasn't a single tooth in his head. He's overweight. He's probably diabetic. And he is a very recent invention. This is not a traditional Father Christmas. He is a marketing device invented by Coca-Cola in 1935 to sell their terrible product. His original version of Father Christmas is St. Nicholas. And if you look at pictures of how he used to look, he was this very lean, ascetic figure, dressed in black, trudging through the snow. In Holland, he had Zwarte Piet, Black Peter, walking with him, and they would reward the good children and ruthlessly punish the bad. That was back in the days when we had the kind of morality that I can get behind. This is a terrible ultra-processed food. It is empty calories, completely empty. High glycemic index, absolutely associated now with an increased risk of a number of serious conditions, including cardiovascular disease, which is one of the most important causes of morbidity and mortality today. Thank you, Father Christmas. Very good movie this year. And then we conspire to make everything worse. Because we're not eating enough, we're not eating the right foods, and we're not eating enough full stop. Up until about 3 generations ago, most of us worked with our back and with our hands. Now, we work at all, we work with our fingers. I don't have to point out to you that this is not the correct way to walk your dog. And this is not really the right way to carry your luggage. So these are ridiculous examples. People do these things. But this is, the remote TV remote is another example. More insidious, it's more universal. And again, I sometimes get bored going over the same old stuff, because every new audience needs to know the basics. If you want to know the new stuff, the sexy stuff, the interesting stuff, go to drpaulclayton.edu. That's the forward radar. This is what I was doing, 5 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. And for those of you who know me, who follow me, you're tired of this too. I'm sorry you have to sit through this. But we're growing so fast, new people are coming to listen to us all the time, so we have to cover the basics. The point is, in the street where I lived, in Edinburgh, my parents were the very first people in the street to have a television. My grandmother was actually present when John Logie Baird made his first transmission from Crystal Palace. She was there in the audience. She was married to a very famous physicist, the man who invented the strip light, by the way. And back in the day, it's hard to imagine, but we didn't have remotes. And so you'd be relaxing in your armchair, and something would come on the television. And back in the day, there was only 2 or maybe 3 channels. That was all there was. Can you imagine how we suffered? And it was black and white. There was no color. And the television sets were very impressive at the front. It's fake, like the plastic. And if you walk around the back, it was just cardboard with slots in it to allow the heat to come out. You could peer through the slots, and you could see the cathode ray tubes glowing in the dark. It was a magical and mystical experience, quite unlike the television today. And the point is, if you had enough of watching, some eternally boring debate in Parliament, and you wanted to listen to songs of praise, you'd have to walk across the room, all on your own, and turn the channels by hand. It's almost unimaginable. I know you have no idea how we used to live. And then once you change the channels, you were faced with this long walk back to the city. And it was, I won't hide from you the fact that it was hard. And the point is that in some very large ways, but in many, many small ways, we have become less physically active. If you go to the kitchens of TVC, Downton Abbey, you watch Downton Abbey, yeah? And you see, how people used to work in the kitchens. Have you ever been to one of those mansions? You go to the kitchen and pick up a saucepan and you can't pick it up. It was so heavy. You had to pick it up in a certain way. The handle, your hand on the handle at the front, and the handle underneath your arm, bracing that, and then you could lift it. Saucepans now don't weigh anything. Back in the day, if you wanted to clean a carpet, you couldn't just run Hoover over it, vacuum clean it. You had to roll the carpet out, put it on your shoulder, carry it outside, hang it over a fence, and beat it with a stick. All these techniques, these technologies have made life physically much less demanding. The example that I find perhaps most interesting of all, if you go back to the Victorian era, the mid-Victorian era, which is an era that I've specialized in and published quite a lot of papers in, which might seem quite esoteric, but it does give us an interesting insight into the way things used to be. The navigators were a group of people at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. And despite their name, they weren't involved in bringing ships into harbor. The navigators were the itinerant manual laborers who dug the canals and laid the railway tracks and built the aqueducts and viaducts that transformed the face of mid-Victorian England. And then, because I was interested in their health, I started looking through the health records, and then I started looking at what they ate. And I thought, my God, these people were eating a lot. They must have been really obese. But it just so turns out that that is the dawning of the age of photography. So we have photographic records of what these people looked like. Now, these people were eating 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 kilocalories a day. slim, muscular, but slim. And the reason is they were working so hard. Each one of those people was expected to dig from below their feet to above their heads as they were working on railway cuttings, 20 tons of earth and rocks and rubble a day. They were supermen. Not one of you could do that. Not one of you could do anything like that. And we can tell, when we look at their skeletons, we look at the sites of the muscle attachments on their bones, they were developed in a way that nobody has to.